We've all been here before at some point. And I know that from the time I was 3-4 years of age with an experience I had when I woke up from a dream. And the word reincarnation was in my head. And I knew exactly what it meant. And I went running into the kitchen and told my parents that we had all been here before. Unfortunately, they were younger than me. And I went running off into the living room, leaving my very, very good, solid prairie parents with their mouths more or less hanging open, and me walking around for the next week or so talking about how we'd all been here before and we all had our lessons to learn and our things to do in this life. Hello and welcome to our inaugural podcast for Spirit Lights Healing Center. My name is Alan Holmes and I'm the founder of the center. I'm a medium, do some healing as well. We are more or less working towards trying to raise the awareness of the spirit world, particularly now, I think, in the world that we're in with the situations that we are in, with all the conflicts and, quite frankly, silliness that's going on. Our goal, I suppose, our hope is that we can awaken people to the fact that first, they are spirit. Secondly, they are a physical form. And all the attributes that go with that, good, bad, ugly, and indifferent. And our hope through these podcasts is to spread the word of spirit, and not necessarily for spiritualism in itself, but for the idea that we are of one creator, from one source, from that one place. And that sounds easy, and yet it's so difficult. We have so many cultural biases and silly things that separate us as individuals and people. However, our podcast, we will be exploring mediumship. We will be exploring healing. We will be demonstrating both on the podcast. We will eventually do live stream radio where people can call in, ask questions. We'll have dialogue. That's hopefully going to come sooner than we think. There's technical issues right now with that we're trying to work out. So cameras, microphones, etc. We seem to have the right equipment, but it doesn't seem to be quite linking up yet. So we're going to work on that and hopefully have that done in the next day or two. I suppose I'm a spiritualist minister. I should say that. That right away makes people think, well, you must have one point of view of this, and you know you're going to come at this with only one way of thinking, and that's really furthest from the truth for me. My experiences, like many mediums will say, started when I was 3, 2, 4, 5 years of age, with communication with the spirit world. For me, I had a lot, and still do at times, world premonitions. These are things I can't get away from. You are a spirit, you are a soul. We've all been here before at some point. And I know that from the time I was 3-4 years of age with an experience I had when I woke up from a dream. And the word reincarnation was in my head. And I knew exactly what it meant. And I went running into the kitchen and told my parents that we had all been here before. Unfortunately, they were younger than me. And I went running off into the living room, leaving my very, very good, solid prairie parents with their mouths more or less hanging open, and me walking around for the next week or so talking about how we'd all been here before and we all had our lessons to learn and our things to do in this life. Can't remember my exact words, but I got a lot of blank stares and a lot of looks of, oh yes, this too shall pass, moments from my parents. God love them. Both of them were born before 1930, and my father was born before 1920 and 1916. So hard lives on the prairies, depression, lots of going without, you know. They didn't have electricity until 1929. They didn't have indoor bathroom until when that happened, but they had an outhouse. Anybody knows prairie winters in Manitoba and how difficult that can be. But they came from that really salt of the earth people. So, you know, what you didn't understand, you didn't comment on, unlike their son. and you kept a lot of things to yourself. So it was that era. It was because it was a lot of survival. It wasn't about having a new TV or cell phone. It was just a lot about getting enough food to survive. And if you did, then you got through the day, you got through the week, you got through the year, and hopefully things got better. So that's a little bit of a quick background. So you know a little bit of where my mentality comes from. Just a few experiences so you sort of know where I'm at with certain things. In 1966, 67, we had moved from Manitoba to Victoria, BC. And I say that because this next experience was one, and I had several in between, but this is rather significant, particularly to what's going on today, especially for environmental things. I had had a dream, and in the dream, I had seen computers that fit on people's desks, and I saw electric vehicles. So at the age of 6, I come bounding down the stairs. We were living in a duplex just off Shelbourne Street in Victoria. And my dad was in the kitchen. I plopped myself at the table and just looked at him and said, one day everyone's going to have computers and electric vehicles. At which point he just stopped and looked at me like I was from Mars, Jupiter, or some other, part of the galaxy. And his brother, my uncle at the time, was actually working in Ottawa. He was the only person in my father's family, who was my father's youngest brother, who had a degree. And he was an accountant, and he had been in the war, and he now was working in Ottawa, and he knew Trudeau very well. So my father phoned him, and I remember the conversation from my father's end because I was listening, as always. And my father was asking my uncle about computers and about the size of computers. And I remember my father asking the question, well, could computers ever be the size of a table? Could they ever fit on a regular table? And not that I heard my uncle's response, but I most certainly heard and could infer from my father's response, because I heard his response, that yes, it was possible, because this is now the mid to late 60s, and transistors were just starting to be used quite widely. The transistor radio was coming in, and there were other devices of sorts. So I knew from my father's reaction that he was more or less checking up on it. But I knew in myself that we would have these things. And 15, 18 years later, the first home computers were being introduced in the early 80s. There was lots of talks about electric vehicles, of course, which sort of came and went with the EV California, which GM, took back, etc. And the reason why I'm just bringing this up is I want people to get an idea and the flavor of where we're going to go with conversations at times. Yes, it will be about spirit. We'll have spirit communication and mediumship and healing for sure. But we're going to have a very broad conversation about world events and maybe where we are, where we're headed, choices that are being made, and the fact that people don't often see what's really in front of them and what's really real. Because we have an expectation. I always say to people, nice people are the best liars. And there's nothing more dangerous than a righteous do-gooder. Righteous do-gooders and nice people have caused more problems on this planet. So often the people we really need to be in certain positions are the ones that we actually don't always like, but they actually do a good job. That's a difficulty right now in this world for people to see. And I think partially because everything seems to be just up in the air, and people want just somebody to soothe the situation and make it all be good and make it go away, like cats in a cage when they ever taken a cat to the vet and they just cram themselves into the back of the cage and they bury themselves in their heads. They don't even want to see where they are. A lot of the human race is like that. So we want to have these discussions. We want to open up the door to them. Like everything else, we'll try and be respectful and give people consideration and their due as an individual. But we also have to be honest. And I will never, just so people know now, I will never back away from a premonition that I have ever had, because every And I can say this in front of a firing squad. Every premonition that I have had has never been wrong, particularly ones in dream state. They have always come true 100%. No issue, no doubt. That doesn't mean I know everything, and that doesn't mean I get them all the time. Sometimes they come in, I might get 3 or 4 or 5 in a row, and then nothing for a year. But honesty, and this is what the spirit world looks for in us. And do we have the strength to really, say what we have and what we know? Anyway, leaving that aside, let's just leave with those thoughts that this podcast is an introduction. And we are truth seekers. We are truth seekers. And that doesn't mean that what we believe is true today is true tomorrow all the time, because truth has a way of revealing itself, and truth has the layers to itself. I've heard a wonderful expression used by various people lately, or a concept that many things can be true at once. And that's correct. Absolutely. It can be sunny on one part of the city and raining on another part of the city all at the same time. That's a truth. It's opposite, but it's true. And the same can be said about many other things. So I hope you will join us as we go along, and as I get my podcast together and we go down this journey together. Just in case I didn't say it in the beginning, my name is Alan Holmes. I am a medium, I am a healer, and I am the founder of Spirit Lights Healing Center. Please join us and with your thoughts and conversations. And thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.